Commissioners, your recording is on.
Thank you. We'll start in a few minutes. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our April 3rd, 5:30 business meeting of the Board of Douglas County Commissioners. If you are needing an agenda, paper agendas are back by the door on the desk there. We actually will start with a proclamation, and I will first ask, is there anyone here who is going to, we'll read the proclamation first, but is there anyone here who'd like to, from the organization to speak on it? Okay, we'll get you in just a sec. Then we will have, after that, we'll have a consent agenda, of which we have 6 items, and then we'll do general public comment. Just a couple of rules for general public comment. Each speaker is limited to a total of 3 minutes, but just always we will accept any length of communication in writing, so that can be done by email. Individual speakers cannot donate unused time to other speakers. All comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission and be directed to us, and we reserve the right to mute any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. After we do general public comment, we will open our regular agenda, and we have 3 items tonight. Then we'll do appointments and administrator or a county commissioner miscellaneous. I should mention that if you come to speak on a regular agenda item, there's also time when we open up for that. So with that, I believe, Commissioner Kelly, are you willing to read our proclamation?
Happy to make a proclamation for Child Abuse Prevention Month for April 2024. Whereas children in our nation's most vulnerable members, as well as our nation's most valuable resources, helping to shape the future of Douglas County. And whereas childhood trauma can have long-term psychological, emotional, and physical effects throughout an individual's lifetime and impact future generations of their family. And whereas childhood trauma, including abuse and neglect, is a serious problem affecting every community in the U.S., and finding solutions requires input and action from everyone. And whereas protective factors are conditions that reduce or eliminate risk and promote the social, emotional, and developmental well-being of children. And whereas effective child abuse prevention activities succeed because of the partnerships created between child welfare professionals, education, health, community, and faith-based organizations, businesses, law enforcement agencies, and families. And whereas children who live in families with access to concrete economic and social support are less likely to experience abuse and neglect. And whereas we acknowledge that in order to solve the public health issue of abuse and neglect, we must work together to change hearts and mindsets through storytelling and sharing, center the needs of families, break down bias and barriers, and inspire action from expected and unexpected partners in prevention. And whereas prevention remains the best defense for our children and families. Now, therefore, the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas, do hereby proclaim April 2024 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Paula? Oh, great. Gotta press that button.
There you go. Sound better? Thank you. Good evening. My name is Bev Turner, and I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center of Douglas County, also known as the CAC. And tonight I'm joined with, I will name them, Paula Martin from our Board of Directors, Suzanne Valdez representing our board and also the District Attorney's Office, Rita Fulton Mays, who's also on our board and represents the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and Board Member Mark Bueller.
Who is lost?
Oh, thank you. And Kylie Lickett, who's also here representing our board in the school district. That was a handful. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month, when we recognize the importance of families and communities working together to prevent child abuse and neglect. When law enforcement or child protective services believe a child may be experiencing abuse, the child is brought to the CAC, a safe, child-focused environment, by a caregiver or another safe adult. At the CAC, the child tells their story once to a trained interviewer who knows the right questions to ask in a way that does not re-traumatize the child. Then a team that includes medical professionals, law enforcement, mental health, prosecution, child protective services, victim advocacy, and other professionals make decisions together about how to help the child based on the interview. CACs offer access and support for therapy and medical exams, plus court advocacy, case management, and other services. The CAC coordinates this multidisciplinary team response, we often call the MDT, to child abuse, and we all work together to support and improve the journey for a child and family. These professionals work in a collaborative approach that results in effective, efficient, and improved child-centered outcomes. In the last 3 years, the CAC has grown rapidly and recently relocated to our new space in downtown Lawrence. This new space has increased the privacy and safety for our families, as well as providing a warm, home-like feel. The CAC board would like to express our sincere gratitude to Douglas County for the ongoing financial support that greatly contributes to our ability to provide all of our services free of charge to our child victims and their families. We will continue to challenge ourselves and our partners in every situation to consider what is best for the child. Today, we are here to represent the Douglas County community, to honor the courage of the children we serve, and encourage all caring adults to report concerns of child maltreatment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And Commissioner Kelly has your proclamation. Thank you. That brings us to our consent agenda. Commissioners, are there any items you'd like to pull from the consent agenda for further questions? I'd actually like to pull item 2.2. And do we have any members of the public who would like to pull a consent agenda item for further discussion? Jill, do we have anyone online who would like to? Okay, with that, I would accept a motion for the remaining.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So Jill, I had a couple of questions on item 2.2. And it was a citizen-initiated text amendment, but we don't know anything about it. We don't have a name associated with it or a story. I'm wondering why do we have it on consent agenda, and what's the appropriate process if none of the commissioners I haven't been talked to about it. I don't know if others have.
Commissioners, I had a conversation earlier this week with Mary Miller, and she's in the panel right now, and she can provide some background to address your comments, Commissioner Willie.
Okay. Mary, I see you now.
Hi. Yes, there's only two ways a amendment can be initiated. It's either the Planning Commission or the County Commission. A member of the public or staff can ask for initiation, but we have to bring them to you to actually be initiated. And so a lot of times if we discover a change that needs to be made, staff will just work on it. If a member of the public brings it up, it's usually better if they request the amendment, because then it's something that gets on the top of our workload. Otherwise, we kind of put it in our list and treat it priority-wise. Sometimes it may take 6 months before it even moves forward. And so it's being brought to you for initiation. And there's a brief explanation of it in the memo. It's just that we used to have a use in the zoning regulations for offices or research facilities in existing structures. That could be done with a CUP, and that was in any district. And with 2020, we changed that. We actually made some specific uses for research facilities. We left offices off completely, and we hadn't really intended to do that. So it was an oversight on our part. And an example of when this could be used, the Vinland Elementary School is a very good example. It was a closed school and they wanted to reuse it. And a dairy company wanted to use it for their administrative offices, and then they would also do accessory storage. And it was able to do that through a CUP because it was an office in an existing use. It's an adaptive reuse. So this is just the beginning of the process. Once it gets initiated, then staff will review it, prepare draft language. It'll go to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will vote on a recommendation, and then it will come back to you. And then we'll make a presentation to you. We may have different wording than what we're thinking of now. Just depends upon what we get with it. We have zoning and codes, works with planning, and we're also talking to the building inspector to make sure that when we reuse a building that it's appropriate to allow public into it. So we're looking at those items. We don't have anything really to give you concrete wise because it hasn't been initiated yet, and we don't dedicate much of our work time to an application until it's been initiated.
I see, and knowing the workload was one of the reasons that I kind of flagged this, because we have a hard time getting on your schedule for text amendments and getting things done. And so I'm just curious about how things fall into the order of operations. I know that one of the ones that we're waiting on that I'm very eager to have is a deeper conversation about home-based businesses and, only regulating what really needs to be regulated and kind of digging into, is that what we're doing, or are we doing something in addition to that? And this initially thought, well, that should wrap into that conversation about what uses are appropriate. I'm looking at Mary as if she was looking at me, but she's just up there. So that was kind of my conversation is this a piece that is separate and on its own and needs to be dealt with, or is it part of that larger conversation about businesses in the unincorporated area, which I'm very eager to have?
Yeah, it's separate. It's not tied to the home occupations, and that amendment is moving forward. We hope to have that to the Planning Commission soon. We just have to finish up the draft language and make sure we're happy with it. Zoning and Codes is working on that, and then we'll take it to Planning Commission. So it's moving ahead, but this is not a home occupation. So it's completely different. It's just an adaptive reuse of a structure. So another example, the Marion Springs Elementary School, had they just wanted to convert to offices, it could have done that through the CUP. It opens up another use. We don't really want a lot of offices. We don't want a lot of new buildings being built throughout the county for offices. But if we have existing buildings, and usually they are old schools, seems like those are the ones that have converted, but it could be something else, then offices are a very low impact use. There's not a lot of traffic. So it does seem like a good fit.
Yeah, and I guess I took it also to be like, if everybody's officing from home at some point, like, it seemed like if that was what was being flagged here, that should just be something that is looked at by right instead of a CUP. So I was kind of misunderstanding that this is non-residential structures, existing structures. Would that be correct?
A person could choose to convert a home to an office, but it would not be a home and an office. So if you had a home, no one lived in it, and they want to convert it to offices, we've never had one like that. I don't know if there's anything that would prevent it, but it would not be a home occupation, because if you lived in it, you would just, like you said, go that home occupation route. It'd be simpler. So that would be the route to take, but it's primarily, we've never had a residential structure. I don't know if that's something that we might want to look into, if we would recommend that or not. Usually they are old schools or just other structures that were used for something, and we don't want them to sit vacant, and an office is a really good low impact.
Okay. Commissioner, sorry, I dominated that. Do you have any questions for Mary, or is this really just me? Okay. Mary, thanks. I'm going to open for public comment, and we'll see if we have any other things for you. Because I pulled this is open for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? Come on up.
A button. Okay. My name is Peter Shanuda. What Mary's talking about is the old Bishop Seabury School that we have a daycare in it, and we are adding an amendment just to put an office building, just to give us an option to utilize that building. So that's what the purpose, instead of the building sitting empty.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would anyone else like to give public comment on this? Do we have anyone online? All right, that closing public comment. Commissioners, do you have any thoughts, motions, questions?
No questions, but appreciate always good to walk through the steps of a process. So clarity is good, and I'm happy to make a motion to initiate the text amendment, Amendment 24-1000, to add office use as a conditional use in certain zoning districts.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, Mary. I appreciate you being here. All right, now that brings us to general public comment. Is there anyone here in person who would like to make general public comment today? And thank you for being here. Come on up and you can have 3 minutes.
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. My sign here says Patrick Kelly is a giant pussy. It says this because at last week's school board meeting, he provided another example of how big of a pussy he is. At the meeting, Michael Irby recorded a conversation he had with Patrick requesting to meet with Patrick in person to discuss a community issue. Patrick declined to meet in person with Michael, stating that he didn't feel safe because of the supposed aggressive tone Michael takes at county meetings. Patrick then expressed that his feelings are what's most important, saying to Michael, quote, "You're belittling my feelings as not being true and not being valid." When did men start talking about their feelings like this? How did this happen to our society? What exactly are you afraid of, Patrick? Your female colleague, Sarah Plinsky, here met with Michael in person a few months ago. A female has more balls than you, Patrick. Aren't you embarrassed by that? Anyway, Michael made a YouTube video of his exchange with Patrick titled, "Patrick Kelly Feels Too Unsafe to Meet," and is posted on his YouTube channel, Lawrence Accountability. Based on the comment section of the video, lots of people agree with me on this, so let's read some of the comments on the video. One person said, "The cowardice in this man is embarrassing to all males." Another one said, "I bet Patrick squats when he pees." Another guy here said, "Patrick, you're a condescending F. Grow a pair or let him drop, son." This guy here said, "This clown definitely got a lot of swirlies and wedgies in school." Another guy here, "What an absolute coward." Another post, "Beta male? No. How's about absolute pussy? What a clown." Another person, "This is someone who is so readily available to play the victim, and it's insulting to actual victims." Another person here said, "What an overpaid, underintelligent simp he is. I'm sad for his wife, who surely realizes this too. I think it would be terrible to know you're married to this, but stick around for her lifestyle anyway. Shameful." Another one here says, "What a wussy that commissioner is." Another one, "Call him a pussy and give me his number." This one might be my favorite one here. "Patrick must wear his mama's panties." Another one here, "Unsafe equals whiny coward." Another guy here said, "I'm embarrassed for this guy. He needs to hand in his man card immediately." And then this last one here says, "He needs to go back to his mama's basement. If this were my dad, then I would consider that I had two mommies."
Do we have anyone else here for general public comment?
Okay, to be clear, I didn't know that was going to happen. So, but it is free public speech, is it not? Correct? Okay. I appreciate the fact that you guys can sit there and go through something like that. It's about time. Because people have been thrown out of your meetings, people have been escorted out of your meetings by police for feelings. And it's going to cost you. It's going to cost all them. You're finding that out through the city right now. You're going to learn their lesson as well. They're going to end up paying tax dollars because of rights violations. You guys are going to cause that as well. You already have caused it, but it is coming. You need to recognize the rights that we citizens have and stop trying to exclude them based on people's lack of knowledge or lack of understanding. And for God's sakes, with the money we're spending, can you guys not get a timer? Seriously. I mean, what's the thing that the city cost? Maybe $50? I mean, I think the sheriff department here get a new body scanner for 100 and some odd thousand. Surely we can spend $50 to get a real timer. So let's work on that. That's a suggestion I'd like to make. My point is that when people are able to express their rights and you guys listen, the public's interests are served. When people express their rights and you guys close down because you disagree with their expressions, that's disloyalty to the public trust. Patrick and I have had conversations since that email that he referenced. And in those conversations, we've talked about how feelings should not be ruling whether you listen to somebody or not. You don't have to like the way I say something. And by God, you can hate me for it. But when I'm a citizen of this county and I come up here and I bring a legitimate fucking concern to your attention, and you act like, and literally say things to me that indicate the reason you don't hear that is because the disrespectful tone in my voice, all you do is create more disrespect by doing that. And you take on the added disrespect yourself that was initially placed with that person I was pissed off at. You've now put yourself in front of them for me. So when the public comes up here to talk and they have a problem with something that's going on in the county, don't make yourselves the target, because that's what you've done repeatedly over and over and over with your dismissive bullshit. Listen to us and ask us some questions. Am I different in private conversation than I am at this podium? Do you think everybody is, guys? We come up here to make a point.
Do we have anyone else who'd like to give general public comment? Jill, do we have anyone online? Okay, with that, we'll bring it back up to the commission for our regular agenda. The first item, I will turn over to Jill or Kim, who would like to take open space.
We'll let Kim start us out.
Hey, all right, good evening, commissioners. I'm Kim Kreiner Ritchie, Sustainability Manager for Douglas County. And here with me tonight is Tanya Voigt, Zoning and Codes Director, Caitlin Amerlin, Heritage Conservation Coordinator, and on Zoom, we have Christina Kacher-Webb, who is Environmental Planner with the firm Logan Simpson. So we're very pleased to be here tonight to present to you and ask for your adoption of the final draft of the Douglas County Open Space Plan. So this will actually be our fourth time coming to you to share phases of our plan development over the past 14 months. So some of our presentation will be familiar, but this being our final draft, we do want to take the opportunity to go back to the start and provide a high-level overview of the whole process, the resulting draft, and offer some key next steps in this work, should you approve this adoption tonight. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tanya.
So efforts at prioritizing the open space conservation in Douglas County date back several decades. Horizon 2020 was adopted in 1996 and identified what open space meant for Douglas County, including spaces providing relief from the built environment and passive recreational opportunities, as well as identifying environmentally sensitive lands. The Eco Square Commission, established by Douglas County and the City of Lawrence in 2003, was rooted in pioneering efforts to convene consensus on open space land needs. In 2007, this commission brought forward the Eco Square Plan. In May of 2019, the Douglas County Commission adopted the Open Space Plan Charter as a guiding framework for developing a countywide open space plan and program. The charter adoption represents a commitment to a multi-year community planning effort, resulting in the development of this plan. Next slide. So why now? Plan 2040 recommends the development of an open space plan. This plan is a tool for the community to intentionally work with public, private, and community partners on shared priorities for future land use and preservation. It is intended to serve both as broad policy guide and as a roadmap for implementing specific open space enhancements far into the future. The plan has identified the need for additional tools to further evaluate existing open space and guide partnership efforts. Pressures we currently face include the wish to protect important natural and historical and cultural features, including sensitive lands and ecosystems due to land use changes, as well as increased occurrences of severe weather patterns, including drought and flooding.
Okay, so key to the development of this plan has been a committee of 15 community advisors. Among this group are experts and enthusiasts representing a variety of recreational activities, conservation efforts, cultural perspectives, land stewardship practices, as well as landowners from different regions of the unincorporated area and agricultural producers. We really want to thank this dedicated group for all the time and effort. They shared brainstorming, reviewing drafts, learning and sometimes leading site visits, and really asking tough questions of staff and the planning team. And these tough questions and honest conversations helped us as a staff and team reflect and adjust to make sure that we're creating a plan that is relevant for our community. So I know that we have some members here present tonight. I'll ask you guys to just wave and just please be recognized and thank you. And for those on Zoom, I'm sending you a virtual high five. And thank you all so much for all that you've done to help create this plan. So I'm going to ask Christine to take over the next slide.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. So we spent over a year engaging with the public. In addition to that advisory committee, we had multiple ways for the community in general to participate. From early in the process, we had a countywide survey that went out, questionnaire that was distributed through mailing announcements, and we received nearly 1,000 participants in that questionnaire. We had some tours around the county that involved a number of local property owners and research folks, as well as the advisory committee. We went to different tabling events, so we made sure we got involved a number of people that may not traditionally come to events, but come to our events, but where we would go to them to get people to take the survey and to participate in the open houses. So those events helped get outreach to a broader demographic. We also had focus groups, which outreach to a number of, community groups such as government, the different governments throughout the county, healthcare workers, conservation advocates, and land managers, folks in the river space, folks in the art space, folks in heritage and cultural outreach as well. Throughout the process, we had 4 community open houses. They were very well attended, from the 2 at the very beginning where we had a workshop format, and then an open house in last October. And then finally, we wrapped up with an open house on this draft plan, which was a final opportunity for folks to comment. Next slide. So that draft plan open house happened the Monday after we met with you last. And so we just want to give a quick update of what we heard and some changes that we made since the draft plan comment period. So we were right in the middle of the comment period when we last provided an update to the commission. And so we had and then following that, we had a public meeting, hybrid style. We had a few folks online, including some other county representatives as well, who were interested in the process from different counties. We had about 30 attendees overall. We heard a number of things from the community as well that we were able to address in this final adoption draft. So you can see in the document, there'll be some minor text edits, just some clarifications, mostly around the conservation criteria and the map sources and data, just so we can clarify where folks are, where the data is coming from, so folks can understand that moving forward. And in general, we did hear a lot of support for the plan, a lot of community members who thought that the plan was really heading in the right direction for the county. Next slide. So in addition to all the public outreach that we received and the input that helped guide the plan is also rooted in data and best available sources for existing conditions. This data covered a number of different topics that outlined what's on the ground currently, as well as challenges that the county has faced around these type of topics, as well as opportunities for conservation moving forward. So gathering the input from the community members and then rooting the plan in this data, in this existing data, is really what sets this plan up for success. Next slide. So using all that information, we developed a vision statement and values. These haven't changed since we've come back to you, or we're back or with you back in February. So overall, the guiding vision and values will provide direction for not only county staff, but also any partners that may want to work with the county in the future and through the implementation process. So we really find this as a countywide vision, regardless of jurisdiction. And we think this document is something that folks can look to guide other types of related programs, whether that's working with willing landowners, to other conservation groups within the university or within the state departments as well. Next slide, I'll turn it over back to Kim, I think.
Yeah, thanks so much, Christina. And so now we're going to dive into some of the action of the plan and really what the plan calls for, really reiterating like the key points of the plan that we think. So this plan is really rooted in these conservation criteria that are listed here. We took a fairly broad approach to these. Instead of having a map or having specific geographic areas, we rooted the plan in types of landscapes that we'd like to conserve and qualities of said land or places that would be in the county's interest to help protect. One thing, as you look through this list of conservation criteria, is it's a very broad list. And so it's not the county's intention to conserve places that have one or more of these qualities, but instead to be a guide to help make those decisions. And so, yeah, so it's not our intention to conserve all of it. That would not be feasible, but it's to help guide in those decision-making processes. Again, they're broadly laid out to be used in multiple different ways across county departments. So really intended to be proactive, but can be used in certain cases where we might need to be more reactionary, but really leading with the proactive sort of conservation there, and can be adapted for different uses, whether that be for allocating resources through a potential grant program or helping the folks in planning and zoning help develop tools for open space conservation. So really laid out those values that we'd like to see in conserved lands. Back one more, girl.
So I just wanted to add, just follow up on Caitlin's remarks that, this list of these 8 criteria, or this, as the plan builds them out, describes them, offers exploratory examples of these 8. The plan fully recognizes that some of these may be in conflict, or there may be decisions that we're faced with as a county where tough decisions have to be made. The goal is that we have these all in front of us, and all of the considerations of the values and the things that have emerged through the planning process, so that we can make those challenging decisions with everything in mind, whether it's coming from a heritage perspective, a planning perspective, maybe a climate resilience perspective, that all of these things are considered as part of the decision making. So additionally, in addition to those 8, the plan does offer additional considerations that can cross-cut all 8 of these areas. And those include public safety from natural hazards, extending the goals of existing plans, representing multiple criteria at once. So if we're achieving multiple of these values at once, those are the things that, the choices that we're faced with as our community grows and our resources shrink, that we have to look at creative and strategies for meeting multiple goals at once. Opportunities for partnership and matching resources, equity and access, or other equity considerations, and also resilience to climate change. Okay, so next in the plan, you'll find recommendations for phasing in implementation of strategies. These strategies really reinforce the county's role as a convener in open space. These include building resources and partnerships, applying new and innovative zoning mechanisms, assessing our internal capacity to move forward in open space efforts, and scale as needed or desired in the community. So the outcome of this plan is not that the county is playing a leading role as a large land manager. Everywhere we look in this process, that's not feasible. It's not a desirable model for Douglas County. Rather, the county will make efforts to and aim to build others up in this space. And Tanya, do you want?
Something I'll add to that when the comments made about, partnering with others and maybe the county not being a major land manager and focusing more on convening. One thing that I think the zoning office hopes to see as a future tool in this program as funding becomes available would be that in critical time-sensitive situations where we've had situations in the past where landowners have reached out to our office and said, in a situation, I need to sell this property, and it might be old growth, it might be native prairie, and I'm going to list it. And the county has never had the tool or the funding to be able to be a participant in the conversation and to contribute in any way, whether that's financially or networking or providing resources to others. One thing that I hope for is that hopefully with some future funding that we could step in time-sensitive critical situations and be able to hopefully partner with others or purchase land in those situations.
Okay, next slide, Carl, please. So further details of specific zoning tools, advocacy models, land partnerships, these are also included in the plan for further investigation and implementation. Carl, go ahead. Okay, so as we moved through the public listening and plan development process, 3 distinct focus areas really began to stand out where the county could actually act in open space and start to take form in our role. So the first being current county park improvements and enhancements. So in our questions, when we're asking people in our early outreach, what do you enjoy doing outside, or what would you like to see more of? We often heard back, well, what public open spaces already exist, and how do people find out about those? And how are we taking care of those? So, that led us to take a look, at what we have, enhance and promote those spaces for access and enjoyment, and look forward to assessing the opportunities to revitalize those spaces and offer learning and collaboration opportunities. So our second focus area, within this, we recognize that landowner initiation and landowner partnerships will be essential for the future of open space. And part of the county's role will be exploring and enhancing, or we propose rather, could be exploring and enhancing our support for those who are currently stewarding the land and that are seeking options for conservation initiatives and care. So learning from our partners and listening to the public, we've come to understand that the model of conservation easements, there are components of that have been a barrier to private landowners. And so part of this work could be examining creative partnerships and programs to help overcome some of those barriers. And of course, part of developing and establishing something of that nature would be assessing the public benefit of those opportunities also. Do you want to add to that?
No, I think you did a fantastic job, but yeah, I think it's not necessarily like we had mentioned before, it's not necessarily feasible for the county and it's not desirable for the county to be a large landowner. So really strengthening those partnerships however we can, and conservation easements seem to be a good avenue to start evaluating how the county can help support that with land that is publicly beneficial and provides those benefits to the public.
The third county-led project that was identified as a priority is the Wakarusa Corridor. The Wakarusa Corridor presents the convergence of all 8 conservation criteria and a rich opportunity for partnerships. The Wakarusa Corridor is also one of the most pressured by new development. This river and wetland area represents diverse and ecological rich landscape. It has natural habitats and sensitive lands. It also has floodway and floodplain, the floodplain that's present across this landscape would provide a natural infrastructure against larger flood events, which we have seen in the last 5 years, and that's a function that we don't want to take lightly with the shifting climate.
I'll add too that this is a really critical and important cultural space for our community. There is a lot of history in the area, so many layers there. There's been a lot of trauma in the past too, so any work we do here would be very intentional, working with community partners and having a lot of community input throughout the whole process, however that ends up taking shape, but really want to recognize the cultural importance of this space and being really mindful, in addition to the ecological benefits, protecting that cultural heritage.
And as you are aware, we are also presently working on a climate action and adaptation plan for the county, and taking very seriously the adaptation component of that and what we can do as a community to build resilience to the stressors that we're already experiencing and that we will experience in the future. And so the synergy between these two plans in protecting floodplain and allowing it to provide its ecosystem services of protecting us from increased flooding and increased hazard of those kinds those will play together and make these efforts stronger together.
Well, so you want me to take it over? Okay. All right. So really, so that was the plan itself and kind of what the plan lays out. We have a couple of next steps that we've identified through this process that we're really going to, as staff, start to work on if this plan is adopted. And so our first step here, we have the ARPA awards that were allocated to the county staff for open space programs. And so our first step is to decide sort of that allocation, identify sort of more concretely, the projects and how it fits in those dollar amounts. And so in those projects, those initial steps, we aim to benefit all 3 of our focus areas. So that could be starting with investigating potential trails at county parks and other infrastructure improvements that could be made. So really partnering with Public Works Department and understanding how the open space plan weaves into their current work and sort of what that looks like. Secondly, and something that I'm excited to share and that you'll see more of in a couple weeks, we did a pilot grant program for open space grants for community organizations focused on open space work. And we will be able to allocate $200,000 to 4 distinct projects in Douglas County that do work to increase access to open spaces, do some planning work related to how folks can access conservation resources. So really excited, you'll see more details of that. And so through that, we learned a couple of things about how we might structure a future grant program, more targeted towards specific things to give organizations more detail of kind of where they can go. It'll also be a lot more helpful having a hopefully adopted plan to provide them more guidance on the county's values there. And also, we learned through that process that if we want to support individual landowners, on land that might have that public benefit, we'll need a bit of a different format to be able to meet them and meet the conservation easement process in a more productive way. So the grant program might not be accessible there, but we can really think creatively about how to support that in the future. And third is really kicking off that Wakarusa corridor study and really visioning what that could look like. We're really excited. The Army Corps of Engineers approached us about being a partner on a flood and hydrology study of the Wakarusa River. So that's a really exciting step. And we hope to build on that, some of those more cultural, recreational elements in addition to that study. So that's really exciting. A step that kind of the work that we've done in this space has already got the attention of some of those folks in a wider audience. So I think that's moving in the right direction. And the last bit is just assessing our current organizational structure and capacity to be able to take on this work in the future. So just more work to be done on where this work falls in the organization in the future. But I think that's really exciting. You have anything to add there? No, and I think that's just about all we have. This has been a really, really exciting project to work on. I kind of stepped into the project as it was initiated, and so I feel lucky I didn't have to do the work of all the prep work. I just got to do all the fun work, and it's been a joy. So, do you guys like to say anything else? No? Okay, well, we appreciate your consideration of this and look to any questions or here to provide any other information.
Well, I know I have so many questions, so I will start with commissioners if you would care to. Otherwise, I can jump in.
Does this plan claim any land, rezone any land currently in Douglas County?
This plan does not claim or rezone any land in Douglas County. So one of the future, hopefully, goals or implementation tools would be coming back, going through a public process, and maybe identifying an open space zoning district that would be voluntarily rezoned. So property owners would come to us, say they have an interest in zoning to the open space zoning district, and then we would go through the rezone process, but it is voluntary.
And
wait, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to reiterate, and none of those changes are in the document before you. Those would all be additional conversations. This is just a directional offering ideas for tools we could pursue in the future.
And does this plan require any expenditure of funds at this time by Douglas County?
It does not.
Thanks.
I'm not sure we can say voluntary too many times in this conversation. I know that was, kind of a reoccurring theme of people that, were worried about what is this, and that anything that would happen here would be voluntary. So I appreciate you saying that a couple of times and letting me say it. Should I start at the beginning of my list? Okay. Thanks, everyone. So we met a little while ago, in the last public meeting and had a discussion. It was a work session. And one of the questions I raised was, what's been the communication with the development community? One of the things Douglas County has gotten really good at is knowing what we care about, what we want to preserve. But that makes conversations about what changes might happen in our community, and some of those be economic development. How do we balance those? So one of the things I'm looking for really in a document for open space is how do we weigh those things? So my first question is, what's been the conversation since then with the development community?
So since then, there has not been much conversation in that vein. But we do want to point out that in each one of these 3 project areas we spoke of tonight, all require more steps, more outreach, more work, more development. And we really see that third piece of the Wakarusa study really being very key in including more voices, more conversation about a variety of different goals, a variety of different values, a variety of different strategies that can be applied in this space. A lot we have to learn about the diversity of the space. So we see that as being a very key phase when those conversations will be very important.
One other change between that time and this time that I very much appreciate is that shift from like, here's a map of things that we would like to preserve, which I think puts landowners really on notice, but it also puts our development community on notice. Like I think it kind of raised more questions than it answered. But instead turning to that list of criteria of these are the things we value. We value especially spaces that might contain more than one of those or many of those really, and knowing that we cannot preserve everything and would not have willing landowners to preserve everything anyway. But so I very much appreciate that pivot. It makes a great framework for me to kind of understand. And I see how you've brought that into kind of these three next potential steps of where we take those values or criteria. And I appreciated that too. The Eco Squared, which was before my time, but I've always kind of heard about it and got to go back and read it as part of this too. And it was adopted 2007, but not funded, 2008, just economically was not the time to fund something special. And this isn't actually funding anything specifically yet either. But one of the frameworks in that, it used, maybe this was too detailed, but it had like a checklist of these are the things we care for ecologically, and these are the things we care about economically. That was the Eco Squared, if anybody wasn't in on that process. It was the development community and the ecological community really coming together to look at shared goals. Like I said, that was pretty nuanced there, and maybe that's not the direction to go, but was that part of the conversation of like, how deeply do we go into that, and how do we kind of also look at land that might be later developed and finding lands that might be suitable for that?
Yeah, I don't know if this is exactly what you're asking, but like referring to how they had like the score sheet, like kind of laid out, I think we intentionally made our criteria a bit not that direct, but that could be a next step. For instance, if we did have a grant program or, some sort of conservation easement partnership, we could develop down the road a actual score sheet that could help make those decisions. But we wanted to keep them a bit more open so that way, we could use them for that purpose, but could potentially also use them in the creation of an open space zoning district or something. They could be flexible in how they're used. So we didn't go into all that detail now, but could definitely and probably would, especially if we had a some sort of system for allocating resources, we would want to develop something like that.
I guess we can also say that landowners will also self-select. They'll either voluntarily want to participate in open space, voluntarily want to participate in some other kind of economic development. So that may also somewhat take care of itself. I wanted to say how much I really appreciated the direct rural outreach. And I think it's something that I had conversations probably with Kim years and years ago about, like, it's so hard to get those voices involved in county policy, because it's just there are mechanisms that are easy to hear from folks in Lawrence and harder to hear from outside of Lawrence in our other cities and our rural areas. And I think those 6,000 or so mailed questionnaires, were those all to rural addresses?
The mailed questionnaires only went to unincorporated areas.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that extra outreach. Not everybody responded, that's okay, but everybody had the opportunity. Another thing we talked about at the work session was kind of identifying the low-hanging fruit. And I think part of that was my, freak out in a suggested funding mechanism of like, what can we do through the planning process? And I see you've kind of mentioned that as things that we will, partnerships we will continue with and things we'll keep looking at. So I think this plan just kind of initiates that we'll be looking for those pieces. And I appreciate that too. I could go on, but I will also yield time to fellow commissioners. Okay, well, I'll take yours.
2 questions. So you mentioned those mailed questionnaires only went to unincorporated residents. Help me understand that decision.
Part of that would be that, this plan is an unincorporated plan. We have been partnering with the city of Lawrence, the city of Baldwin, city of Eudora, Lecompton. We've had meetings with those parties, but I think it was pretty cost prohibitive to mail. I think it cost us about $6,000 or something to mail, maybe it's $3,000 to mail out to the unincorporated areas. And then if we would have added all the residents to the city limits, it just would have been, we wouldn't have had the budget for it.
Can you?
And
thank
we
you.
did have an online questionnaire. I want to make that clear, and we did push that out. And the distribution of responses was still very diverse and more diverse because we had the mail return. So I think.
Okay. How might this document be used in a planning application? How might this document be used in a transportation plan?
I think that's yet to come. So with the adoption of the plan, then we start having discussions of how each department would like to utilize the goals. And when you looked at the conservation criteria, you saw that it has them outlined, but it doesn't necessarily weight them. It doesn't say one of these criteria are more important than another. And I think every department wants to use that criteria maybe a little bit differently. And so that, again, is a part of a public process. It would require a text amendment. It would require public hearings going before the Planning Commission. And I think maybe the planning office might want to use that conservation criteria a little differently than the Heritage Group. So we left it pretty open.
And the transportation example, well, actually more than that example, there was a lot of research on existing plans that went into complementing and building this one. So for example, the countywide bike plan was called on heavily for some of the recreation, transportation, movement around the county goals that involved moving through open space or getting to open space. And so we're building on what's already there, and we hope that that pattern will continue beyond this.
Commissioner, really, I just wanted to rewind just a little bit, Tanya, to your answer to Commissioner Kelly's first question about that this is a plan really for unincorporated Douglas County. And you please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to be clear for anybody who's listening that I think by that, Tanya, means that, our zoning and codes office has regulatory authority over the land that is in the unincorporated area outside of city limits, and so therefore that's the land that could and might be affected by or conserved or otherwise, given public access to. And so not necessarily that it's only for unincorporated residents. I just didn't want anybody to take that message away because obviously I think throughout this plan, it's very evident that it's about people who live in the city limits wanting environment outside of their urban or suburban environments, in addition to the different ideas and goals that landowners have in our rural unincorporated area. I see a head nod from Tanya, so I just want to make sure I'm on the
Yes.
right track with that.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Reed. My mind is mostly around parcels.
Yep,
And
got
these
it.
parcels are located in the unincorporated area. That's the zoning side of me. So the open space plan would likely be, the goal of the open space plan is for it to be utilized by everyone, including people inside the city limits and outside the city limits, and from all over.
Yeah.
Not even just Douglas County.
And yeah, good point, because it's a big tourism draw, I think, is part of the appeal. And, that also makes me, I think it's an important point to sort of, I guess, put a point on also because back to that voluntary word, right? And the idea that we want to keep conveying, it is a, into some of your questions, Commissioner Woolley, about the development community and builders and businesses who might have interest or thoughts or concerns about some of these ideas. Ultimately, this is a plan that is largely, I see it as a really important tool for landowners who have varied interest in what to do with their land. And that looks like a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. And I think that this plan we have right now illustrates some examples of that, but really everything comes back to the landowner, right? And what the landowner has interest in doing with their land. And then to the point, I think, of our staff really emphasizing that the county's role is to be a convener and sort of a conduit for connecting resources, that we can be a hub for information to help landowners connect to the options and choices available that align with their interest, whether it's built environment and development or conservation or something in between.
Without wearing everybody out, I'm going to poke on that yet again, the voluntary. So if there's a landowner that comes forward and is interested in a development project, there isn't a mechanism in this plan for the community to come back and say, no, the open space plan says that land should be for something else, because that would go against having a willing landowner. So this isn't a tool to shut down. And I'm just kind of thinking through this out loud. This can't be really used as a tool to shut down development from a willing landowner, because that would be the first thing that needed to be satisfied.
That's correct.
Okay.
And in addition to that, especially in the Wakarusa corridor area, that area butts up against the city limits. The city limits obviously can annex ground at any point that touches their city limits and then develop that how they see fit. So that also is just another factor. But yes, it would be voluntary. We have no overlay districts, nothing that would be prohibitive of someone coming forward with their thoughts and ideas for a piece of land.
Probably should be said how much I'm very excited about all of this work. I keep poking on all the other pieces, but I think having a framework for us to have a conversation about what we care about, and having tools for landowners that also care about their land and would like to see it preserved or public access or any of the above things that are here. I really have valued that from the beginning of this idea. There is ARPA money set aside for the open space plan. At what point, and I know it's not this point, but at what point might we see a budget for how you would recommend that we spend that, and then have a community conversation about that?
As soon as possible. We may be back to you very soon with details of potentially wanting to do an RFP to do a more comprehensive study of the Wakarusa River corridor. So while the Corps of Engineers is interested in hydrology, we have a vision of doing even more comprehensive look of everything from culture to agriculture to biodiversity to the future impacts of climate. And so that is just one thing that we've already kind of earmarked as a huge opportunity that we can make progress on this list. So that's one example. I don't have firm others, but that conversation will be coming very soon.
Part because the deadline to spend that money is coming fairly soon, right?
Yes.
In terms of the flood study from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers wanting to be involved with that, or flood hydrology, kind of having that be a piece of the picture, looking at the valley. Emergency management also might be like to be in that. I've had some emails back with them about kind of similar things, and it didn't occur to me until now that that's probably something that should circle back unless it already has.
And they were the first point of contact, so we're all in it.
All right. This plan and the climate action plan were both being kind of workshopped a lot at the same time, which has been a huge lift from this group, and thank you for that. And I kind of think of them kind of in pairs. They they complement each other, but they also have some tension with each other that I think is probably healthy and good. So I guess I would love to have seen them, and it's not practical, to come at kind of at the same time for adoption. But instead, what is the time frame for a climate plan?
So our timeframe would be to bring that to you in May.
I think I'm about slowing down. I know we haven't done public comment yet. Are there any other questions at the moment?
I just thought of one quick question with some of the recommendations around county park improvements and enhancements, which are kind of the things that are seemingly right in front of us and tangible and able to grasp. Has part of that conversation been about, like, I mean, you kind of touched on it, Kim, I think, like increased awareness of those parks and like how to get there, what to explore there, kind of things. And I'm thinking specifically, well, I see Mike Delaney here, and I'm just thinking of that sparked my thought about the app that I'm, of course, forgetting the name of now. I think it's for the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area app that has sort of like a trail app or and historical information. I guess I wanted to say that idea out loud, but also ask if part of that plan for enhancements to the physical location of the park and the accessibility of parking and ramps or paved walkways, things like that, if it is also sort of a public communications plan to really let folks know about those assets in the community.
That is a great idea. And it doesn't, as you're saying, as you're describing that, part of open space awareness doesn't just have to be the two parks that the county has. It could be what are the historical areas in the county that people can visit. That was also some of what we heard is what's there. And I mentioned what we have responsibility for, but there are additionally other spaces that are managed by nonprofits that are, or by, sorry, I was about to say KU, but that's not publicly, sorry.
Some of them are, though.
Yeah.
Some of them are, and some of them aren't. So that's a good point.
Yeah,
to
I want to make sure
delineate
not everything's public, but what is
Because
public?
Kansas Land Trust
yes,
has
what are those well-hidden gems and that we can help raise awareness and bring people outdoors to.
It seems like a future story map. So the world has taken over with GIS. I have people who call me about our layers all the time and say, can we put this in? Or where do I find this? And I mean, there's so many people in the public who use the GIS mapping system that maybe, open space with collaborating with Kansas Land Trust on conservation easements, anything that's open to the public, putting it all out there on a map so people know how to get to it, how to travel to it. Maybe have them hyperlinked where they know the hours of operation and those types of things as well. It's a great idea.
I have exciting news we actually have already begun that. HCC has developed a story map that's on our GIS system of natural landmarks in Douglas County. It's not comprehensive of everything, but we did a lot of work on it, and it is on our public GIS. And so that could be added to and adapted and could be a great start. But yeah, it's a really great thing to check out. And I think I left some postcards here on accident. But if folks are interested here in the room, I've got a handout that you could take with you that has information about that resource. But anyway, yeah, it's a wonderful idea and I think a great way to share and get folks out and explore our beautiful spaces.
So this isn't county-owned land, but it is owned by or managed by an elected body. There are rural cemetery districts. So in the west half of the county, we have rural cemetery districts. In the east half of the county, I don't know who takes care of our cemeteries, and sometimes nobody does. But so those are another thing of it's open space. There is some amount of access, and just getting that information out there too, because it's part of our heritage. And I'm actually thinking especially of the Lewis Kreider Cemetery, which I don't think there is public access to, or at least not very often, but it's also a piece of our heritage. So just having the story, even if we don't have the access, because that's not everything in open space will have public access. You've been very patient. I would like to open this up to public comment for anyone who'd like to speak on this item. I would especially value hearing from folks who served on the advisory board if anyone's interested. So who would like to start?
I'm happy to start. I hope there are others that'll join me in this. I'm Mike Delaney. I think my portfolio on the advisory committee was as a representative of one of the county's heritage partners. And so when I looked through the draft of the plan, it was with an eye to how this plan meshed with the heritage elements in Plan 2040 and in the county's heritage conservation plan that's in the code. And I think it does a great job of centering some of those same ideas. And so I could hardly be more enthusiastic about the draft that the troop has come up with. But the two points I really wanted to make here are the extraordinary work that the county staff did on this and the consultant as well. This is a real model for generating public input and coming up with policy recommendations to put before a decision maker. That if every elected body used the same approach, the policy might be better. And in any event, some of the problems or some of the concerns might get surfaced earlier in the process. And I can't recommend highly enough the idea that the county should replicate this approach as it takes on some of these other issues. Whatever comes out of this comprehensive survey in the Wakarusa River Valley, ultimately, if the county decides to move a step beyond merely convening to help resource efforts at conserving open space, then the whole process of what that resourcing looks like and getting public input on that. This model worked really well, I think. The one, and I think the sort of relentlessness of the staff when the original responses to the survey didn't produce sort of the diversity that was expected, going back and saying, look, we got to mail stuff out to people that don't use and the last point is, I would really urge the county to continue to take advantage of the organs that exist now, like the Heritage Conservation Council. I can say that because I'm about to rotate off, but that's a resource that's helped to develop this natural area tour, website and those sorts of things. And it's also one that's looked at a whole variety of other sort of grant opportunities. And the folks that serve on that come from a variety of backgrounds, all of which are sort of at the heart of this plan. So I'd urge the county to continue to rely on that group. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for serving on our Heritage Conservation Council.
I'm Kelly Kincher, another advisory committee member. I'm very pleased with the work of staff. I'm hoping you guys will approve this. I want to nudge you a little further in that realm. I've been involved in conservation a long time. I work at KU as a conservation biologist. I've received our Conservation Commission's funding for mapping prairies and forests in Douglas County. It's sad to me how little's left. We're losing still more prairies and forests that remain. One of the barriers to keeping them is there's not been a mechanism. This creates a mechanism. I'm really pleased with that. But a big issue has been funding. And quite frankly, we've just not stepped forward and done that. I was on the ECO2 committee. I was very pleased with that work. I think we had a great product, and at the end of that, kind of the promise that we would fund both economic development and protection of natural areas and open space. And we did fund the industrial park. ECO2 was half funded. We did not fund open space. And that's been a real problem. And we keep funding things that actually hurt open space. If you think about this, every time we fund an expansion of the traffic way or other public works projects that affect development in the county, we're hurting natural areas. So we need to be active to fund those. And the two things I see, and we're talking about staffing, yes, we need a core staff person. I keep mentioning it, we need a deal maker. You need a staff member who's a deal maker, because there's been a lot of opportunities to protect land by willing landowners in the county, and there's not been a mechanism to do that. We need someone with some real estate savvy on putting together coalitions. There's a lot of funding outside the county, matching funding, those sort of things, much like there is for roads and other development projects. We need someone to put that all together. And then ultimately, we need a way to fund this. I mean, other counties across the country, not all progressive like Douglas County, have funded open space, and we need to come up with a mechanism to do that, that significantly funds it, because we significantly fund other things in this county. So, thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to come and speak?
First, I'd like to say good evening to Chairwoman Kelly or Willie and Commissioners Kelly and Reed. And I submitted written comment yesterday at the email address, but I brought a signed copy for
Can you
your
also say your name?
official. I will. I'm about to. So my name is Julie Coleman. I'm the Vice President of the Kansas Land Trust, who it sounds like you have some familiarity with already. And I'm here just representing the board to encourage the county to adopt this plan. And I'll just say a few things to summarize what I submitted in writing. First of all, commending the commission for investing in the process and the excellent work of the staff. I read the plan, I went into the portal, I went deep into the portal, and the amount of work was pretty impressive. And the result is a comprehensive, good, strong conceptual plan. I'd also like to commend you for the robust involvement of residents and partner organizations that help make this a strong plan. That's going to serve us well moving forward. So, there was a big emphasis on partnerships in the plan, and the Kansas Land Trust is looking forward to continuing to be a partner in accomplishing the goals of the plan. The Land Trust has worked for over 30 years with landowners, private landowners, who come to us voluntarily and want to establish conservation easements to protect the various values of their property. And we serve as a mechanism for them to accomplish that end. We've got 80 conservation easements with private landowners across the state, protecting over 40,000 acres of valuable land for various reasons. It's either prime farmland or it's a sensitive ecosystem. And I love the prompts, by the way, thank you. So 12 of those properties are in Douglas County, protecting 900 acres currently. And just a few things I'll point out. They already line up with your conservation vision in the plan. The Aikens Prairie, east of town, protects over 200 species of native plants. There are a couple easements. It's also open to the public. The Earls and Oldfather easements are properties where the Land Trust does guided tours. Hope you can make it out to our ephemeral spring walk at the Earls easement on April 14th and see exactly what we do. There's more information about that on the website. And Lawrence, Nature Park up on Folks Road in Lawrence is a great example of how the Land Trust can collaborate with the municipality to achieve common goals. So we look forward to working with you, and we encourage you to adopt the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to give public comment?
My name is Jerry Kaufman. I live at 646 North 100 Road, and I have served on the Open Spaces Advisory Council. I ask a lot of the tough questions. I felt that was important because I represented the unincorporated area of the county on the council. I would like to address 3 of the open spaces criteria that are covered. I think there's emphasis on certain areas in this first phase, but also I have concerns about some other things too that I want to share with you, and the council's not surprised because they've heard me say this over and over. First of all, our historical and cultural sites, our Douglas County Rural Heritage Resource Guide says that only 2% of these eligible properties are listed, and that's a concern of mine. I see a need for increased grant opportunities for the HCC so that they can continue to do the kind of work that they're doing now, which is covering a lot of funding for a lot of projects. I've been listening to their deliberations. I also want to address 2 areas of very great importance to me. That is the saving of our native plant communities, our native prairie and our restored prairie. On page 24, there is a statistics listed in the open spaces plan that says that we are losing our prairie greatly in 18% of what was remaining in the last 10 years, and we're approaching another 10 years of 18% loss. It's very concerning. I see this as an important issue, and I'd like to see some work on that now, not later. Another area is my 3rd area, which has to do with streams and wildlife corridors. It has to do with the old growth forest and saving that. I have noticed in the south and southwestern part of the county where I live, a lot of logging going on. I was approached about this and I said no to the person who came to my house because I said I would only do this under the advisement of the Kansas Forestry Service or another type of forestry management. I just would like to say that in your proposal, we didn't get to staff today, but there is for a full-time staff person related to open spaces. I support that because I think Kelly addresses too, but that person could also be meeting with some of the landowners, and we may be late in terms of our forestry and saving our old growth forest. But I think those are the kinds of things that if we would have someone who could dedicate their time to the open spaces plan, they could certainly provide guidance in the areas of working with our folks that have native prairie and have old growth forests, which I both have on my property, and I would greatly appreciate having someone that could provide leadership in management. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else would like to come and give public comment on the open space plan? Come on up.
Natalia Lowther, 1480 North 1700 Road. I am very, very excited to see this plan coming to completion, which is actually the beginning. I have owned my property for very close to 30 years. And I have spent that entire 30 years trying to figure out how I can conserve that property as open space, farm ground, natural space, anything but houses, anything but development for 30 years. And I haven't been able to even conceive of something that might be retirement because there has been no mechanism accessible to me. I have never met the acreage minimum for Kansas Land Trust. So there have never been any conversations other there. And so I really, really hope that there will be mechanisms, funding, et cetera. Even if I qualified for, if the land qualified for Kansas Land Trust, I can't afford to make the donations that have to go along with that. Partly because I've spent most of those 30 years in these rooms for some reason or another instead of farming. So I just really hope that there will be funding and support in place to do the open space overlays, to make conservation easements accessible to landowners that don't have money. and that don't have large pieces of land, but have very important pieces of land.
Thank you. Would anyone like to be next? Do we have any other takers in the room? Making eye contact with people. Do we have anyone online, Jill, who'd like to speak? Okay. With that, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. And I know I have more questions now, but I should ask. Okay. This is probably something we don't know yet, but I put it out here anyway. Will there be an outreach mechanism to contact landowners that we know that BioSurvey has done surveys of native prairies and high quality forests and such, and we have some for historic properties also. I think at least with the historic properties, I think people know that they have them. I think that was part of the mapping, was also the outreach to say that this is what you have. So if only 2% of them are listed, that folks at least know what the resources that they have. Would there be an outreach mechanism to say, now we have an open space program and we're better able to connect you to resources?
I think that definitely could be an option, especially once we have a program. That's really the key point. I don't think we want to make any promises we can't keep, of course. But, yeah, I think that would definitely be part, especially if there's a targeted grant program, we would definitely reach out. I know in the past, when HCC has done our specific barn assessments, there was specific mailings to property owners with old barns. So I think any sort of program that's specialized like that in the future could definitely have that targeted outreach.
And I might add that one thing that we currently do in the zoning office, when a potential buyer reaches out to us to ask zoning questions on a property, we actually check the database and we send any potential buyer that information as well.
Another one, I'd also be curious to hear what other counties are doing to fund programs like this. And that's not for today necessarily, but like when we come back and we talk budgets, I'd be really curious. I'd say for my own interest, I'm very interested to see how we spend the ARPA money first and get a budget for that and kind of play that out. And then I think I will feel more confident to look at what is a longer term option for funding, because I think I'll have a better idea of what we're capable of. Another piece that also for you to consider to put in the program would be that idea about getting management help. So maybe the land isn't changing hands or isn't being put into an overlay district or something, but just, I know that when I was first a rural landowner, how overwhelming it is, all the things we don't know. And I came in with a pretty strong ecology background in the first place and was still pretty overwhelmed. So I think there's, especially as we've had kind of an explosion of rural homes, rural small land holdings, to be able to get, if there are workshops or how do we get information out to people about what best practices look like. I think one of the instincts of folks is to just, let it go, quote, back to nature, which ends up as cedar trees, which is then not only bad for habitat, but a really lousy a fire issue also. So that's something that I just put on your radar. And see if I can read my handwriting. I wanted to make a point. Folks came up and spoke about the outreach process, which I also really valued. It was also not cheap. So in order to be able to do that on like every land use item or every county item, we're probably not there. We had grant funding to cover this, right? Yeah. Okay, commissioners, who else?
I don't have any questions, just a couple of comments. I appreciate staff clarifying that this is a plan. We have lots of plans in Douglas County, both city and county plans and open space plans and transportation plans, and we're really good at telling other people what to do with their land, what our aspirations are, how I would like to see my community look. And that is a noble, noble goal. And I think that's a great conversation to have as a community. I do want to caution us a little bit. I agree with, maybe Commissioner Willie didn't say this, so I don't want to put words in her mouth, but we did receive some communication that says we did not include a number of people. I take issue with that. I think staff really worked hard to include as many people as they did. I know commissioners did as well. We really reached out to some members of the community and said, you need to get engaged with this. It is a tactic to use not to get engaged and then come back later and say, no one told me. So I don't want staff to feel like they didn't do a great job of reaching out. That said, someone out there didn't get to say what they thought. And so I think that's a fair thing to hear and understand, that this plan maybe doesn't represent everyone in our community, but a large number of people who were involved in it. I say that because I think these tensions between development, open space, and land use are going to happen all the time. And you know, this notion that a plan will force something to happen, I think my experience is that's not true. We have a comprehensive plan that you could pick one side of it at one day and another side another day and see how that works out. What will be more impactful, I think, will be when we start to actually make action on some of these plans. That may be through zoning regs, that may be through expenditures by the county, it may be choices by landowners on how to do those things. That's where we see these plans come into reality, and we're not there yet. And I think it is easy to take a plan and say, this is what the action is going to be, when we don't know. The action will be what this governing body decides, what maybe joint governing bodies decide, what individual landowners decide. There's a long way to go in this. So I want to make sure that we're not over-promising on these plans. This is a step in a further conversation about how we use the land that we have in Douglas County. And I appreciate everybody's work and engagement on it. I think it's a good step. Appreciate staff's diligent work on it. It was a lot of work. And we were very fortunate to have the funding that we had to do this work. That funding is gone now, or almost gone. And so I think it was a good use of those dollars. So there's a little bit of a rambling there, and thanks for putting up with that. But I guess I want to say I'm supportive of the plan. I'm also interested to see what actions occur beyond that plan.
I appreciate those comments, Commissioner Kelly, and I think it makes me think about how my overall impression of this plan as it exists today and is, well, to Natalia's point, sort of at completion, but also the beginning, in the start of that actionable work and some tangible examples of what this might look like over time. And I think we're going to see a spectrum of answers to that question, which is something that I really appreciate, because for me, reading through this plan and just the evolution of the plan and all the time, I think, Kim, did you start out by saying this is your 5th time back before us?
4th time.
4th, okay. And you know, that there's been a true evolution of this process that I believe, from my perspective, has been really responsive to the community's feedback. And that this document is really representative of a lot of values that a lot of people, not everybody, obviously, no community has 100% of its population that holds the same values. There's tons of overlap and difference alike. But I think that it really, in a still brief but also nuanced way, addresses a lot of values that sometimes seem like they obviously go hand in hand, and sometimes seem like there's some real tension and maybe competition of values that come up in primarily our land use decisions before this body, but a variety of things, right? And so I really appreciate that about this document. I think that it It does not, while it has some recommendations about some tangible actions or models or options in front of us, it is not prescriptive in nature. And I'm grateful for that because I think that there is a lot about these conversations that are open to interpretation by different parties with different interests and different values. And I think that this document does a pretty good job capturing what a lot of different values that sometimes seem to go hand in hand and other times maybe rub up against each other. And for that, I'm really grateful because I think that that's a good conversation starter. I think it's, to me, reflective of what we as commissioners are sort of like, it sort of articulates some of the things that we are grappling with and thinking through and weighting in our decisions. So I'm super impressed with it. I've appreciated the process too, and how evolutionary it has been, and that the staff and the community members that were involved in this did not get stuck in the mud, along the way. I think, it can be kind of murky waters in the beginning to figure out exactly where you're going and what the direction is and what are we trying to articulate here, and thinking about sort of like rewinding a bit and resetting at times. That is, that's really good collaborative work. And I think that shows through because nobody was, as far as I can tell, stuck in whatever the original idea or concept of how to write this plan, how to engage the community. So I just want to appreciate staff for the tenacity in that, and community members for being really thoughtful and nuanced. In addition to, so I'm very supportive of this. I have one little idea I want to throw out there. Appreciate, especially around the Wakarusa corridor, the emphasis on cultural significance and historical significance for Native and Indigenous community members. And then also towards the end of the plan, there's some talk about kind of broad community, other external partners, including tribal nations. As part of that sort of ongoing conversation, and I'd say especially in communication with Haskell and then tribal nations, I'd be interested in seeing something in the development of sort of, I forget exactly how you phrase it in here without scrolling to find it, but that sort of toolbox, if you will, for residents to access where to go for conservation easements or grant opportunities or restoration opportunities, sort of that resource catalog, I guess, that might be available for landowners. That another opportunity, although it's not a money-making opportunity at all, but something that I believe people are interested in if they know about it, would be to learn from some of those tribal nations and partners at Haskell how to articulate an option for a landowner to give land back to a tribal nation, or to, it would go to a tribal nation. There's lots of examples of that throughout North America. I think it's looked like a lot of different things. When we are cataloging what sort of options are available to people for what to do with their land, that's an option. So I'd like to see that explored a little bit and maybe get some feedback from some of those tribal nations about if they have any programs that are sort of already in existence for inviting that opportunity if it exists, right? I think there's lots of questions to be asked about that, but I just want to put that out there as an idea to explore. I don't have any other comments.
Thank you both. I did want to tag on, Commissioner Kelly made mention of a communication. We actually all received it, but it was too late to get in the packet. So and that was a letter from Ron Geisha. So I called him and reached out and asked over some of his concerns, which some of those are some that I've asked about and shared. And I feel that to my satisfaction, those are answered or will be answered in the processes that come from here on out. I am especially interested in seeing a budget and talking about the dollars that we have and kind of being thoughtful around that. So I commend you very much for the work. This has been a little bit like pinning down Jell-O. I have struggled to know through the years that we've talked about creating an open space plan, like how to engage with it. Like I didn't know what it was. I couldn't advocate for it. I didn't start to understand it until kind of the draft that started to bring in the criteria of, and just looking at the various mechanisms that we have to dig into that don't touch on the scary things that people were worried about. So I'm really pleased with it, and it took me a while to get here. So I hope that feels like a compliment instead of the other, but I really appreciate the work that's gone into it, and I'm excited for what happens next. I hope you don't run out of steam, run out of energy, because I know that what feels like the beginning to the community has been a long journey to get here for you. So, commissioners, is there any interest in a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion to adopt the open space plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for your work.
Thanks, y'all.
And for everyone's patience while we got
Thanks for
through one
coming,
item.
everybody. And for a round of applause. It's so rare.
And that brings us to our second item, which is from administration. We will let Jill kick us off, though I think
And I'm
actually
going
you're
to pass it to Michelle.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, I don't know how I follow that, and I did not hire a slide flipper, so I'm on my own here. Give me just a second.
And you don't have nearly as big a cheering section.
No, I don't, which is fine.
And maybe you should.
This is not near as fun as what you all just talked about, so.
Just to be clear, we didn't hire a slide flipper. That's Carl. That's Carl. He's part of the planning department.
I don't know how I share this. Yep, it's not doing it.
No, open this back up.
Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Is that my right? That's my right screen. Yeah. Okay, good evening. Well, I'm going to talk quick. So I've got Brooke here. She's got some information she wants to share, and we got Christy here who manages all the day-to-day benefits administration, and she's kind of our guru expert on the benefits. But for now, let me figure out how. Yep, Okay, so we'll cover a few things. We'll talk about the previous plan year, the 22 to 23 plan year. Seems like forever ago, but when we have these meetings, we never have a full year of claims in there. So I'll quickly just recap what happened last plan year. We'll talk about year-to-date expenses, and then we'll talk a little bit about the June 1st renewal and what we're recommending for that. So last plan year, we came in at 4% under projected, always a good thing. The year before that, the 21 to 22 plan year, we came in quite a bit under projected at 10%. Part of that savings, that we recognize were our stop loss premiums. So just to remind you what stop loss is, we actually buy insurance from a company to help cap our loss. So we buy stop loss insurance through Optum, and we have a $195,000 deductible on any one person's claims. And once the county pays $195,000 for that one person's claims, the stop loss company picks up and starts paying. So just a reminder of what that is. So part of the savings, we did have a very favorable stop loss renewal for this plan year, for the last plan year that I'm talking about. So that did contribute to coming in under budget. Our medical claims, for the same period last year, we're up 17%, and prescription claims are up 13, almost 14% when compared to the same time period. But again, those lower stop loss premiums really helped us recognize coming in under budget. I like to look at benchmarks, or I call this member burden is the term I'm used to using for this. I like to see how much of the total plan cost Douglas County is covering and how much our employees are picking up, how much it's burdening them. So Douglas County covers around 77% of total plan cost, and our employees, so through our contributions out of our paychecks, our deductibles, and our coinsurance, employees are covering 23% of total plan cost. To look at year-to-date.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can I ask a question on that real quick? Because you've got a lot of information on some of these slides.
Yeah.
So do we have a goal on that, or that's just interesting?
That's a good question. I've spent years at the city, and we did have a goal and we do have a healthcare committee now. We've got representatives from every department that come to these meetings. This is something that's on my list to talk about through our missions and, where do we want to land? And we'll involve Willis, our consultant, to see kind of what the industry standard is. We have a very rich plan. I can guess that some plans are maybe 50-50. I don't know that we'd ever want to get there, but yeah, so that's a discussion, where we want to land. So claims currently, when I put this up here, we had data through January. We do have data through February now, but I haven't studied that, and so I didn't update the slides. So at least through January 2024, our claims are running about 95% or 97% of budgeted. So we are running pretty much a balanced plan at this point. So the money that's going in is also going out. And we were at more like 83% this time last year. So we have 5 large claimants and 4 of those claimants have hit stop loss. So we consider a large claimant anything over $97,000, and that's half of the stop loss deductible. So 4 of the 5 large claimants do not have ongoing conditions, which is a good thing. So, they're more acute type, a cancer would be an ongoing condition. You have someone that, has a heart attack, has surgery, their treatments are coming to an end. So at least 4 of those 5 large claimants are not ongoing. So that's always good news. Stop loss, we've gotten some decent stop loss reimbursements this year. So we've got some pretty severe claims. The ones that have hit have been really big, have been well over that $195,000. So our dental experience, not a lot to talk about there. It's very favorable. We even added several plan enhancements last year. Like we cover, we've had some implant coverage. We implemented covering braces, so orthodontia, which has been extremely popular with our group. So we were really glad that we can do that. And even with those plan enhancements, we're sitting very pretty in that plan. So First Stop Health is our telemedicine. So I think Christy does a great job of educating employees, especially all these new hires that she sits with and talks one-on-one, educating them on this benefit. It's free to employees and their family members. As long as the employee is on the healthcare plan, their family members do not have to be, but they still have access to this. I know Jill and I have talked a lot. She's used it. We do have one of the best utilization percentages in their entire book of business. So our employees really do value this benefit. So this is just a quick snapshot of historical data to show kind of where we've landed year over year. It's a very busy slide. I won't spend a lot of time on it. What I really like to look at is that pink box at the bottom, one of the last lines in that pink box, the budget variance. Those percentages are how we come in according to what we budgeted. So you can see 17 and 18 and 19, and even, we had some years, 15, 16 and 16, 17, we were 103, 105, 110% of projected. So we had some rough years in there, which we kind of had to eat into reserves a little bit. But the last few years have been very good. So, and I don't know, it's just a mix of claims. I don't know what to attribute this to. We thought maybe it was COVID and, delayed care. That really hasn't panned out like they thought it would, or maybe it's just still delayed. I'm not sure. Or maybe our employees are just very good stewards of their healthcare plan. That's what I would love to attribute it to. So, but in any case, it's been good news. So it's been good news. We are having a pretty, not a rough year, but we do have some higher than expected claims this year. So our medical and pharmacy claims have increased. Trends have increased just in the market. I mean, healthcare just gets more, it never gets cheaper. We all know that. The high cost claimants and the severity of what these high cost claimants have had going on are attributing to rate increase of 7.6% over what we're contributing now. So that equals about $678,000. So an increase in rates is just, it's an increase in funding. That increase can come in several forms. It can come in increased employee contributions out of their paycheck. It can come in increased money out of the county's budget. And it can come out of plan design. So we take away benefits or we increase deductibles and co-insurance. I mean, it can be a combination of all of those things to meet your increased need. If you look back the last 12 months, so you're kind of overlapping plan years here, we are trending higher than expected at 20.3%. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with the severity of these recent claims. Some of it has to do also with our market trend expectations for Elixir, which is our pharmacy benefit manager. Our plan does cover those GLP-1 drugs, so your Wegovy and your Ozempic, those are very, very high cost drugs. We do cover them specifically for weight loss. I think the idea is cost avoidance down the road. If you can get someone on one of these medications and they can lose 50, 75, 100 pounds, maybe they're stopping 5 other medications they're taking, and it's preventing, a major catastrophe down the road, like a heart attack or a stroke. There are parameters in place with these weight loss drugs. They're only going to the people that meet certain parameters. You have to have a certain BMI. I mean, so people that deal or struggle with obesity should be the ones getting these drugs. And so we have some protections in our plan to make sure that happens. Elixir did sharpen their pencil a little bit when we were talking about renewal. They did kind of a refresh and some negotiating, and we can expect a significant increase in our rebates. And again, rebates, it all depends on, the mix of drugs that people are getting. But Elixir does return a lot of those rebates to us. I don't know exactly what percentage of those rebates they keep. I have that information, but so we are expecting some really good rebates next plan year. We did market stop loss like we do every year. Optum, who we're with now, did come back with a 40% rate increase. Again, going back to, we have 5 large claimants. The claims have been pretty severe, or the diagnoses have been pretty severe. So they did give us it actually came in at like 37.8% renewal when it was all said and done. Luckily, we have Willis in our corner, and they have negotiated a rate cap increase before we sign a contract. Otherwise, we could have been looking at as much as 100% increase in our stop loss premium. So glad to have them be a voice for us for that. And this was all quoted, keeping the individual stop-loss deductible that I mentioned at the $195,000. We could save money if we raise that deductible, and we've had that conversation, just not in time for this meeting, but that is something we talk about every year. So, and we'll continue to cover that every year as well, so. I'm going to let Brooke step in. Brooke manages our employee benefit fund, and I want to talk a little bit about what that fund looks like before we get into our recommendation on how to move forward. So,
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, Commissioners. Brooke Sauer, Douglas County Finance Manager. I want to come before you tonight to talk a little bit about the funds that are available to cover health insurance premiums and to pay claims. So we ended the year with $5.75 million in fund balance. 34% of that value I can attribute to health insurance costs. So we can safely say that roughly $2 million is available in that portion of fund balance to go to pay for claims. So with that being said, we do have additional funding available to pay claims because that amount is not very high if we have a lot of surgeries that month or we've got to pay claims. So we have an additional $3.86 million available in our health insurance trust account. That is our operating account for health insurance claims being paid. We also have payroll liabilities. This is the employee's portion of the health insurance premium that's deducted from their check. And it waits until that health insurance trust fund gets a little low. When it gets a little low, Christy requests a transfer into the health insurance trust account, and that's how we go to satisfy those claims. Before my time at the county made an investment a number of years ago, and that money is sitting in a cash investment account and it is accruing interest. This funding would be available in those really scary years that Michelle kind of talked about a little bit. If we were to ever get low in our trust account, that money would be vital to be able to satisfy our obligations to our providers and pay those claims. I want to note very specifically that funds available in the health insurance trust and in that investment account, it can only be used for health insurance. We can't use it for CAPERS, we can't use it for KP&F. It is very specific to health insurance or wellness expenses. So with that being said, the total available to pay claims is $10,262,45. We have a surplus. The full budgeted increases have not occurred. Some of that perhaps is due to COVID. We have had some very favorable plan years. And I've got some percentages in what we budgeted and then what the actual increase was. I do want to note though, in 2022, we completely redid the way that our plans are designed. Michelle was able to implement an HRA plan. And so that negative value is a little bit wonky because we were able to mess with the premiums a little bit to make it a little bit more equitable amongst plans. So I just want to note that there. Also, premiums for health insurance have increased 25% since 2018. For single coverage plans, just so you guys know how we do it, we have a full premium amount. And then if it's an employee-only plan, the employee pays 10% of the premium. Any coverage level above that, the employee pays 20% of the premium. So that amount will always change. And then we can't forget about our retirees. They do pay 60% of the premium for all plan levels. And then, Michelle, do you want to cover it? Okay, great. Thank
All
you.
right, Brooke, before you go, I just had a question about the last thing you said about retirees. Is that through COBRA, it's like it's a period of time, or is this an ongoing availability?
This is an ongoing availability. When retirees let us know that they're ready to leave us and go off into retirement, they meet with Michelle or Christy and they discuss the plan with them and they stay on the plan that we're on currently.
Brooke, because employees pay into the account. Is that why it sits as a trust fund and we can only use it for that?
I think it's a combination of two things, yes, and public funding that we're putting into that trust was for that specific purpose. And I think that it is established by resolution for that particular fund. But I would have to probably double check on that and get back with you.
Okay.
So the last bullet there, you know, before I get into the next slide where I'm going to recommend that we keep employee rates flat, there has been a lot of movement since 2018. If you look at the single and family deductibles, they've increased 233%. And when I did this math, I was like, that can't be right. Brooke checked my math, and she said it's actually 233.3%. And I'm like, okay, so my math is good. And then out-of-pocket maximums have increased, you know, 52% for an individual, and for a family, 36%. So we have made changes. So it's not like employees do not have some skin in the game in this. You know, when I first started here, you know, and Sarah talks about those scary years that she had, I think probably before your time, where this health insurance fund got low enough that she was, you know, afraid that we wouldn't be able to pay claims. I mean, she never wants to be there again. We have that conversation a lot. So we've made changes to prevent that from happening. But again, with favorable plan years and maybe COVID, the increases that we thought we would need just didn't happen. We just didn't end up needing those increases. So we've just continued to fund this plan or this account. And not actually need it, which not a lot of people can be up here saying this kind of thing. So it's good and bad. But so having said that, you know, due to the healthy fund balance, we would recommend keeping employee contributions and out-of-pocket costs for medical, dental, and prescription flat. I don't think I would ever recommend rolling back any of that, because once you roll back, it's certainly hard to roll forward again. So we're not recommending any plan design changes, not really adding any benefits, taking any benefits away, just leave it status quo. The only thing we would like to do, we have a small reimbursement for hardware, you know, glasses, contacts, and that's just paid through the medical plan. It's been $50 for a number of years, and if you've bought glasses, you know $50 would buy 1/2 of a lens at this point. So we are recommending, and it's not a big cost item, we are recommending we increase that to $100 per covered member to get reimbursement for glasses. Because we don't have any other coverage for glasses or contacts in our healthcare plan. We do cover the routine exam because we want people to get those at 100%, but you know, you're talking, you know, $3,600 in a year, you know, for reimbursements. We would like to renew the stop loss contract with Optum. Again, we kind of went over that a little bit. The one thing, we also have what they call aggregate stop loss coverage. So there's what they call an attachment point. So if our claims, you know, our cost would come in at 120% of expected, and that is net of stop loss reimbursements. Then the aggregate stop loss would pick up and pay. We've never been there. Willis recommends aggregate stop loss coverage for groups of 500 lives on the plan or less, and we have over 1,100 lives on our plan. It's not a lot of money, but it is really, in their opinion, it is a waste of money to have this coverage. So they would safely recommend that, and we can always add it back in if we get to the point where we're like, nope, we're scared, we can always add it back in when we renew. And then a wellness program enhancement. In my presentation last year, I had a wellness plan in there. It was a pilot program through LMH. The annual cost was going to be around $30,000. We knew our fund could absorb that. And I had a very similar program when I worked at the city that I managed. LMH has kind of exited, they're discontinuing that part of their wellness programming. So they had trouble finding a nutritionist to have on staff, and just the bandwidth to handle it. So we have contacted Samantha Derlin. She's a local provider. She's very involved in the wellness community. She has what she calls Simple Wellness, and they've created this specifically for Douglas County employees and their covered dependents. It's the Roadmap for Wellness program. Again, very similar to what we was approved to do through LMH. This program is a little cheaper. It's $695 a person. It's a 6-month program. It's you pay as you go, so we don't pay all the money up front and then lose out. There's program eligibility. It's based on your blood work, your BMI. So someone that has a perfectly healthy BMI and no comorbidities, they would not be eligible for the program. So we still need to figure out, how we target this to people and our communications and stuff. But we did want to replace what we previously had. And we do have a $10,000 wellness grant. So we have even more money that we can spend that we got through Blue Cross Blue Shield. So we've tried spending that down a little bit with some, we've started partnering with City of Lawrence Parks and Rec for their fitness class program. And so we're offering some fitness classes for employees if they want to do it. They can enroll, and we're using some of that wellness grant to help pay for that as well. So, and I think it's been pretty well received. These next couple slides I won't spend a lot of time on. Again, this is just a snapshot of what our plan looks like. And again, we're not recommending any changes. So this is our PPO plan. Again, employee rates, we recommend, stay the same per pay period. And then we have our HRA, or our health reimbursement account. We had about 10% migration over to that account, which is typical when you first put a plan like this in place. We may not see any more migration since we're not making any changes, but down the road as we increase that PPO or increase the deductibles and stuff in this health reimbursement account, but we keep it a little cheaper per pay period, we might see a little bit more migration to that plan. So
Michelle, can you talk a little bit about that and why employees maybe ought to, or what the benefits are moving over to that?
Well,
You touched on it.
Sure. With the health reimbursement account, it's there's some things built into it to help you be a good steward of the healthcare plan. So you get some seed money, so to speak. An employee gets $250 if I just have an individual plan. If I have anything other than an individual plan, I get $500 seed money. That money goes toward paying claims, and it counts toward my deductible, even though it's not my money. If I don't spend all of that money in the plan year, it rolls over to the next plan year, and it will continue to roll over until it gets to whatever maximum we set. So when that bad year comes along, which we all have, you could have $1,500 or $2,000 in there to help cover your deductible and a little bit of your coinsurance amount. So it's a smaller version of an HSA, or a health savings account. You just don't have all the stipulations that you have with an HSA. So it was just a baby step into consumer-driven healthcare. So does that answer?
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Okay. A few more recommendations. Increase our medical flexible spending contribution to the IRS allowed maximum of $3,200. Currently it's $3,050 or $3,050. IRS now allows a rollover of flexible spending dollars. For years, they did not. And I think this came out maybe right around COVID. They started allowing a rollover, and they've just slowly increased that year over year. So we'd like to just stick with those IRS maximums for the rollover, so $640, currently $610. And then no changes to dependent care. IRS still has a limit of $5,000 per household. So that's where we're at, and we'll stick with that as well. So. Voluntary benefits, these benefits are of no cost to the county. These are all, the cost is completely borne by, by the employee, but we do have a lot of changes. We have some carriers that are exiting the market. There is a carrier that's our AmeriLife Benefits or Benefits Direct is what they were known as. They've seen some decline in service for a carrier, so they're recommending a change with that, and it even has richer benefits. We're adding an optional buy-up vision plan, and we did that mainly so if we offered the buy-up vision plan, it kept our current supplemental vision plan, it kept those rates flat, and so it was important to us to keep those rates flat for employees. So we thought, well, it's, again, no cost to us, so we'll just offer the buy-up plan. And then we have a new offering of pet insurance. So I think we'll have a handful of people excited about that. I know I will. I have 2 dogs that it'll happen one day that they need to have that leg fixed. So yeah, offering some pet insurance. And I think that is everything I had, so.
Thank you for that. Commissioners, do you have any questions before we open for public comment? No questions. I was going to say, I'm glad that I was able to follow almost everything you said. Yeah.
Good.
I'm learning as I go. I think we'll do public comment. Is there anyone in the room who would care to give public comment on this item? And Jill, is there anyone online? Okay, with that, close public comment, bring it back to the commission.
I'll just echo Commissioner Willie's comments. That was a great presentation and helped. You answered any questions that were there for me when I just read the packet and struggled to track some of the things. So excellent job on that. And thank you for putting it all into context. I don't have any other comments, but if other commissioners.
So I say this almost every year. My first time on the commission, this was the first thing that felt overwhelming to me. And also because I thought there was a lot of things we could do to strengthen our healthcare plan. And I really appreciate Michelle and your team's work, and Brooke, Christy, thank you for your work on this, because we have created some savings. We have created some other options. I think that health savings account was a real way to, especially for some of our younger employees, I think we may see, I almost want to nudge, I'll be sorry for saying this, I'm sure I want to nudge up that, when we hold it flat, because I think long-term, we have to look at those HSA accounts. I mean, just a consumer-driven account long-term, because I remember when I first came on, it wasn't the good years. And so it's been great the last couple of years, and hopefully we can keep it down for our employees. But it's good that we have that established as a way of helping people out if we get to really high premiums again. So thanks for your work on maintaining that and continually looking for ways to save our employees money, and in the long run, save our county taxpayers money as well. So
It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
Commissioners, I would look for a motion if you're ready.
Commissioner Reed, I move to approve the recommended healthcare plan employee contribution rates and stop loss renewal with Optum for June 1, 2024 to May 31, 2025 plan year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. Have a good night.
That brings us to item 3. Does anyone need a break? You doing all right? Okay. And that, I'm going to pitch this to Jill also. This is a community partner funding agreement with Bert Nash for a particular project. Do you want to talk about that?
Commissioners, you may recall the the commission, I believe it was late last year, you were asked to approve a grant agreement to formally accept a grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Administration Department for a permanent supportive housing grant that Douglas County applied through the Balance of State Continuum of Care. We were awarded that grant in 2022. We actually had the grant agreement authorized and approved beginning January 1 of 2023, but details. We are moving forward with executing the actual services of that program because it entails the delivery of a permanent supportive housing program for individuals that have a demonstrated history of chronic homelessness. That's the nature of the grant, the way it was written. It is required that individuals meet that criteria and have that documentation, and it's reflected in our Homeless Management Information Center. That's a real unique population of folks, and quite frankly, it's going to be a significant challenge to our community. But it's a challenge that I think many of our partners, particularly our partner that's going to work with us on this program as a subrecipient of this grant, Burton Nash Community Mental Health Center, has a substantial amount of experience with, and are, as I mentioned in my briefing memo, they are the only provider in this community that's able to provide that level of service for that population. We know that many of the individuals that have a history of chronic homelessness have a severe and persistent mental illness and are also struggling with other co-occurring disorders, whether that's substance use disorder or history of trauma. So what you see in this this draft scope of services, because it is beyond the authorization limit of the county administrator, it's got to come to you all to approve this agreement. But we have the funding that's been approved by HUD. We will, working with Burton Nash, they will seek reimbursement from us along with the schedule that they seek reimbursement for all the other things that we have a funding agreement with them on. This is a separate agreement. And then working with my colleague Brooke Sauer, we will draw down those funds through the federal system to reimburse ourselves. Matthew Falk is here with Burton Nash, and I might ask him to come out because he's been sitting here so patiently and shared. The program is underway. His team has been working really hard to begin approaching landlords and getting those units ready, having units ready, and working with our COC partners to start identifying individuals that meet the criteria to be in this program. So Matthew's here if you want to just talk briefly about efforts underway, and we can both stand for questions.
Thank you, Commissioners. Nice to see you again.
Is that green, Matt? Thanks.
There you go. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this program. As Jill said, the program is underway. We've actually leased up 3 units and we filled 2 of them, and we will quickly fill the 3rd. So we are making progress. The plan is to have 12 units. We'll continue to approach landlords. I think it's important to consider the type of project this is. Permanent supportive housing is going to be perhaps the cornerstone or key type of service that will be employed locally. It's employed nationally to address the more acute population of individuals who experience homelessness within our communities. This is a type of permanent supportive housing project. Permanent supportive housing can be offered in a lot of different models. This model is a master leasing project, so we go out into the community and we master lease units from landlords. That is a little bit challenging because it does require that the landlord agree to a contract that we present to them, because it's a deviation from the contract that they would normally offer a tenant, and that comes with some agreements. So we do have a little bit of a challenge in that respect, but we do have landlords that we work with regularly who are willing to work with the program, and we are getting units leased up. Clients who come into this project come through the coordinated entry system. Whether you're familiar with that or not, that is a HUD required process for assessing individuals who are homeless, assessing their level of risk, ranking them according to that level of risk, and then the network of service providers meets actually every week to conference those cases and refer them to available services that are HUD funded within the community. And this is one of the available HUD funded services. Those referrals come through that group. Individuals don't have to be Burt Nash clients. They don't have to be involved in the mental health system. And we operate according to a housing first model, which is basically a no barriers model. So we don't require anybody to do anything other than be on that by name list in order to come to this program. We don't require them to go through substance abuse treatment. We don't require them to be a mental health client. And then we take those clients on and provide supportive services to them. This is permanent, so they can stay there indefinitely. It's not a transitional program. So theoretically, they can be there forever. But the idea is to work with them to rehabilitate them to a point where maybe they do want to move on or get a voucher that is a permanent voucher, and they can move into that type of subsidized arrangement that would free that unit back up for us to use for another individual. So that's kind of the strategy we have long-term. But if someone's not comfortable with that, they can be there indefinitely. That being said, this is not necessarily a foolproof project. We have had permanent supportive housing projects in the community before that were defunded. And in fact, we had one with the Salvation Army that had 14 beds. So we're still kind of clawing our way back to gain the capacity that we had previously. So that being said, there are different types of things that change, either with HUD or locally, that could play into that. So our hope is to keep this as long as we can. It does require that we apply every year for renewal, and that renewal process is a competitive process. I'm also a member of the COC Balance of State Steering Committee. I'm also a member of their performance committee, which sets some of those standards. They're all set by HUD, but we're the ones who kind of I guess, filter them through and set up those processes for people to apply. So it is a competitive application, and we will have to go through that every year.
But we have been approved for 2023. So, yeah.
We have at least 2 years of operating capacity.
I want to make sure I heard you right. The federal government funded a permanent supportive housing grant and then withdrew that funding.
It did. It was complicated. It's more complicated than just saying that. I only say that because the notion of permanence is not as permanent as we think. So there are times and circumstances in which things like that can be taken away.
I think you mentioned the Salvation Army was the organization that historically held that grant. It's not easy to get these grants and to maintain compliance with these grants. So we've talked even at an administrative level about the burden that it is to apply for these grants and maintain them. So, I'm glad that we have this partnership with, if we're going to assume a lot of that administrative burden, that doesn't mean that Burt Nash doesn't have to do a lot as well. A lot of the data and the monitoring on clients is significant as well. But if our role at the county can be, and I'm not saying that's a policy, a direction that you all, I hope, would give us if we were to ever expand that role. But with this grant is an example that we're assuming a certain amount of the administrative burden. That administrative oversight and a partnership with a highly qualified supportive service provider. I don't know if that was the case with that previous grant holder, and that was a previous leadership of the Salvation Army. It's a really hard program. It's a really hard population. I feel like we've set ourselves up to be really successful by having this partnership with a trusted partner.
Yeah, I mean, these grants are, I guess, standard practice for HUD, and I think we have the strongest partnership in the community to operate this type of project.
Hey, Matt, just make sure you're next to the microphone.
Sorry. I think we have the strongest arrangement to operate this project in the community. I do think it is important, though, for people to understand that it is a competitive process. I say that as a member of that group who sets and understands those policies. There's a ranking process, and there are some incentives over time to reallocate funds. It's a weird federal kind of arrangement, but I only say that because Douglas County is a very high priority for the COC. We have the largest number of individuals within the COC who are homeless within our region. So they want money coming to us. However, if we were very successful, for example, at reducing the number of homeless folks in our community, there could be a time in which the COC would not have prioritized Douglas County as highly. And in that case, we would have a hard time ranking in that competitive process. So those are just things to consider as we look at the long-term process for getting grants and holding grants and maintaining grants.
So I had a conversation with Jill earlier this week, and it sort of opened up my mind to thinking about something I feel like I probably should have thought about before. When we think about supportive housing, sometimes we have programs that are attached to having that supportive housing. But, if housing first is what we're trying to accomplish, sometimes participating in that program may be a barrier to the housing. Is this a program that, or is the programming required for these people or an option for these people?
It is an option, it is not required.
Okay.
So we are operating according to a housing first model. So we are not requiring anybody to do anything other than what the housing first model would require them to do. So in housing first, we can require them to meet with a case manager once a week, and we do require them to pay a portion of their income if they have income towards rent. Those are the two fundamental requirements that are included in the fidelity model for housing first, and we will make those requirements for those individuals. Other than that, the requirements are that they comply with their lease, and the leasing document is very typical that you would experience if you were leasing up with a landlord. That functions as an occupancy agreement under our master lease, and in a lot of ways it reads like a lease. It's basically outlining what their responsibilities are. That they have a rental obligation, they're expected to keep the unit up and take care of the physical structure, they need to get along with neighbors, things like that. But in that vein, what we do is we separate services from housing. So whatever services they are or not involved in has nothing to do with their housing and their access to the housing resource.
Thanks.
And I really appreciate that last thing you said, because that was what I was going to ask next. So there's not a requirement that they engage in any particular services, but there's certainly a linking of people to services for options for their choices to deal with a substance use issue or a behavioral health issue. Like those things are part of the model, is to connect people to services when they're ready. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. That's what that case management component is for. And I think a strong component of operating this project with an agency like ours is that we come to the table with those services ready at hand. So we wouldn't have to go and broker with an outside agency. I can say, if you want mental health services, we can provide that to you. If you want substance use services, I can provide that to you. So it makes sense. This is the type of, I think, arrangement, or these are the type of agencies that HUD wants operating these grants. So it's a strong
I
program.
recognize this is an odd or awkward question to ask or answer, but in terms of, so there's nobody's being pushed to do any, to connect with any services. So you can't really set goals and say, well, we really think when we offer this program that X number of people will choose to connect with services. But is that something that is thought about or talked about? I don't suppose you can set metrics for something like that.
No, we don't set metrics because this is a destination program. When you look at the continuum of services that HUD funds, so from a HUD standpoint, homeless outreach would be a first kind of point of contact service. The intention of that service would be to get people plugged in to this program. And this program being a permanent supportive housing program, I guess from a housing standpoint, they've kind of made it, right? Like this is where they need to be in order to alleviate homelessness, as if you see homelessness as a very acute issue of not having a place to live. So for HUD, yeah, once they get to this level of service, there's not a lot of other outcomes to achieve, considering that HUD is the Housing and Urban Development Administration. So, yeah.
Well, and what we talked about in our supportive housing collaborative 4-day training last month and the month before, which a substantial amount of Burt Nash staff were there to be a part of, we talked about the person-centered approach that's required for a for supportive housing to be successful, and focusing on what has to happen to keep that individual housed and to prevent them from being evicted. That's going to look different for every person, but it requires sitting down with that individual and coming up what are their goals? And maybe their first goal is just to stay housed. And that's a good one for a good amount of time, but it requires a person-centered approach that I think maybe here in the next year to 15 months, maybe we'll have some examples of what that path has looked like for some of these folks. Yeah.
I guess I'll maybe modify what I said. There are two goals for this program. One is that they stay housed. And the other is that if they exit the program, they're exiting to another permanent housing destination. So those are the two metrics that are really measured at the level of HUD, other than simply how many people have we served, how many hours of service have we provided, have they met with their case manager, did they pay their, those types of things that are in compliance with the Housing First model. So our goal is to keep them housed or make sure that they end up going to another permanent housing destination.
I'd say one of those other, you mentioned the expectation that individuals pay up to 30% of their income. That, just talking to some of the peer organizations that have similar grants, there's an organization in Kansas City, Kansas, Kim Wilson Housing, that has the same grant. And their executive director, in some of our technical assistance conversation with them, has said in the monitoring conversations they've had with HUD over the last couple of years, HUD is increasingly looking at things like, how many of these clients are you seeing an increase in that 30% in that income that they're able to attribute, and maybe tying that back to, are the activities that case management's engaging in with them, is it leading to them having more supports or ability to maintain housing in the future? Even though this is permanent, their ability to thrive independently, perhaps in the future. Those are the things that HUD's looking at, but they are just, the expectation is to keep them housed. And if they lose their housing, which some may, the staff is obligated to get them rehoused.
Yeah, I guess there are two kind of tiers in that process. The landlord could want us to move someone on. The landlord may want us to move someone on, but we are still keeping him in the program. There are situations where we would exit someone from the program because whatever they've done is not in compliance, and we assess that they're not going to be successful. There is a very kind of step-by-step criteria. We have to create that process for HUD. They require us to have that as a component of our application. So as Jill said, there is an opportunity to retain people in the program and to relocate their housing. But then there's also a point where we would ask someone to exit the program.
And presumably someone could also choose to exit the program if they wanted to, and would that count as not meeting that goal of moving them to another permanent housing?
It depends how they exited. It depends where they went. Yeah. For example, if someone's income went up substantially, it's theoretically possible that their income could increase to the point where their 30% obligation is actually the cost of rent. And so the project is there for no longer providing a service for them. At that point in time, we would exit them to permanent housing, but we'd also exit them out of the program because they've been very successful.
I'll keep going. Okay, it's been talked a lot today. So in terms of the amount that the county applied for the HUD grant, so we have these funds available, and we use those until they run out. Is there other matching funds? Is that the sum total of the budget for this program, or are there other pieces coming to it?
So because I want to be a little more secure in the setting up my projects, we're braiding this funding in with our existing programs through CCBHC. So the staff who are manning the program, their wages are not fully supported by this project. If the project went away, we would still retain them, and we would still actually offer some sort of service that's similar to this. So we are engaged in master leasing as an agency. We have been for several years. So I'm standing up another independent team that just manages and serves our master leasing projects, and braiding this fund with that program to provide some, I guess, more security and sustainability. So this project is not paying 100% of that team. It's paying only for the 12 units and then a component of their wages in respect to the services that they're providing for those 12 units. But they are also providing services to a wider group of clients that's helping to support that program.
Thank you for that. I'm also excited to hear that the master lease program is kind of beyond these, high acuity individuals, because I hear from landlords to say, I would be more willing to take a risk on someone who didn't quite meet my traditional requirements if I thought there was someone who would help. So just having someone else to kind of stand in the gap, and sometimes it's just a communication between, like, here's a behavior, I don't know how to approach them with it. If we had a case manager or someone, or the master lease, some other entity, I think landlords would be interested in that, to take a chance that doesn't feel like such a big chance.
Yeah, that is something we're trying to spearhead. In fact, it's not necessarily related directly to this project, but that same team or component of that team, we have kind of a beta test with Union at the Loop, where we've arranged to have staff space within their facility multiple hours throughout the week. So basically, we're officing within that apartment complex in order to help support clients that we have there. We have a number of clients there, so that is very, very successful thus far. It's actually helped us avoid some problems, and it's kind of peace of mind for them, as you mentioned. And we are looking to expand that to some of our other partner landlords. That takes a little bit of time. They have to provide a space, and then we have to kind of come up with some agreements around, what's expected and what we can and what we cannot do. That is something that I think is going to be increasingly important as we continue to work in this space, and we continue to talk to the community about a pretty volatile subject. We can't, for example, force anybody to engage in mental health care. So there are limits to what we can do for landlords, or limits to what we can do for community members. I know people may be concerned. They see somebody who is very, very ill. They see someone who clearly needs a lot of help. If that person is not willing to engage in services, our hands are tied to a large extent. So managing expectations, understanding what is possible, the rights that protect you and me also protect them. So as we work in this space and as we talk to the community, I think that's an important conversation to continue to elevate, that there are limits to what we can achieve if people are not willing. And then the bar is very high if someone's not willing for the community to come in and force somebody to do something. That's not a very low bar. And we run into that every day. But the same will be with this program. I can't force somebody to do something, and there will be people who therefore get exited. There will be those instances.
And that approach requires us to, as a collaborative supportive housing community with the partners that participate in the training I mentioned, to get a better understanding of practices like harm reduction that can be deployed to keep folks housed, to maintain that housing while not forcing compliance, because we can't force compliance, as Matthew said, but taking a harm reduction approach, what can be accomplished. That's kind of the harm reduction strategies are still very taboo, but there's a lot of interest in getting better understanding of those and utilizing those more, again, just to keep folks housed.
So the new units that will come with the project on 6th Street for Bert Nash, on 6th Street, will those be additional permanent supportive housing units, or will this funding or this program kind of transfer over to that project?
Those will be additional. If I'm successful in obtaining the funds that I'm applying for that project, a portion of that project will be funded by HUD dollars, and I can't pay myself twice. So I can't use HUD dollars to pay for a HUD project. So that limits us in that capacity, but our pro forma for that is separate. I have a very sustainable pro forma for that project if and when I get it up and running, so that it will add to our housing stock. That's the intention. Yeah.
Still have a couple more if you're willing. Okay. So one of the things I think the community wants us to ask and keep asking is when we get people housed, and dollars go into making that happen, which these in this case are federal dollars that are coming into our community for this. But what are also the cost savings? Because we know that when folks are unhoused, there are a lot of cost burdens that end up on the community also. Do we have an understanding of that, or how would we get to one?
That is in my mind, a very important piece of data that we don't have a very straightforward or clear way of achieving as a community. To track that cost requires a lot of different agreements with a lot of different agencies to access data that is sensitive, right? But we can start to gain a picture of what that looks like in different sectors. So if you look at, for example, the judicial system, you know what it costs to keep someone in jail every day, per day. Think about individuals who are high acuity and tend to have higher contact with law enforcement. Right there, you start to generate a number that you can compare to. This is the cost of an apartment per month. This is the cost for 30 days in the jail system. So we can gain pieces from certain parts of the community that we have better relationships with, that you have better agreements with. The ER is another one of those. You can look at the average cost of the ER. There's some general numbers we can gain from national statistics in respect to what is a daily cost in an inpatient psychiatric facility like Osawatomie or Larned. Those costs tend to be $1,800 to $3,500 a day, depending on where you're at. So you can gain some, I guess, semblance of what the cost savings are, but in respect to gathering that data as a local community, seeing all those price points for an individual and tracking that for an individual and saying, hey, this specific person costs us X amount of dollars, we're not there yet. I think it's an aspiration for us to get there. I would like us to see us get there, but there's a lot of work that we would have to do to do that.
I know there's a lot you're being asked to track just to comply with the HUD grant in the first place, but I know that there's a real interest in that, and I think it also helps us tell the story and helps us allocate dollars for permanent supportive housing. Even if there's other communities who have been able to do that deep dive and come up with some comparative numbers, I think would be really helpful for us as a community to know. So I don't know if those are out there, but keep your ears.
The familiar faces, yeah, I think that's one of our best projects that has a lot of overlap here.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Commissioner, I think, well, I mean, Matthew, you're right. There's opportunities, but it's difficult because of the layered agreements and participating entities that it requires. But I do think we've got a good foundation in our community because of MyRC. And so a lot of that information is already captured and available to us. Now, how to Matthew's point, sort of really zero in on some explicit and specific costs that are available to pinpoint for people that we know have been experiencing chronic homelessness, especially. So that's some of the conversations that we've had in Familiar Faces Initiative, which is for anybody else listening, for a National Association of Counties initiative, and sort of peer sites who are working on really housing first initiatives and coordinated behavioral health care, and identifying that that there are folks in every community who tend to cost emergency services quite a bit of money, right? And who are familiar to lots of different entities, but not necessarily entities who are talking to each other regularly or with the sort of consistency that is required to be able to better serve that person and figure out where the failures in the systems are and where the gaps are that people are falling through, and to be able to sort of, as a byproduct of that, aggregate some data to really be able to tell some de-identified stories about what someone's, because it's there's two parts to the story, in my opinion. There's the answer to the community who questions why local governments are pouring money into serving vulnerable populations and trying to resolve chronic homelessness. But I think it's also beneficial for providers and for the consumers of services for there to be an articulation of the story of, the cost of that is indicative of how much struggle and lack of access that individual had, and had to rely on the ER for all of their healthcare, had to rely on EMS response for every crisis because of a lack of reliable supports. And so I think that it's important to tell this story both from a perspective of being able to really show some clear contrast with data that I think is available in MyRC, and that it's possible to grow the quality of that data and how we can look at it in a really holistic system-wide perspective, but to also help illustrate the story of what that means for the person who had to go through all of that struggle and rely on those resources because of a lack of available supports. So I stumbled through that a little bit, but that's my thought in response to that, if it's helpful, Commissioner Willie.
I thought that was fantastic, actually, and I'm glad that you remade that link between, there's a cost to the community for someone who is unhoused, but that cost not only is dollars to the community, but reflects a lot of suffering of the individual, and so it's always both and. So I have one last question, and then I'll be done. So we have 12 units that will be funded by this, and not everybody qualifies for this. Is a pretty subset of the population that actually qualifies under this funding. Just roughly, what percentage of the folks who would be eligible for this does 12 people represent?
Well, I'm not recalling the number right off the top of my head, but I think the last number of folks who were assessed as chronically homeless was over 100.
Yeah.
So
130, 140, something like that. Yeah.
So 12 or less percent.
That actually brings up one clarifying question. I thought of this earlier, but then it left me. Are we talking about individuals? Like, are these all individuals,
Yes.
not families, and
Correct.
not couples?
It's in, I think you could do couples.
I guess I'm just curious, I should
Can
say,
serve
does
couples?
HUD have parameters around that?
So HUD does have a definition for chronic homelessness, and I guess it does apply to the individual level because the definition requires that the individual have a disabling condition. So HUD's definition of chronic homelessness is that the individual has been homeless for 12 months straight, or they've had 4 episodes of homelessness in 3 years that equals 12 months, and they have a disabling condition. So yes, according to HUD, only individuals can be chronically homeless.
Okay, thanks.
There are programs that serve chronically homeless families, though. I think we know this is one of our priority, hardest to serve populations. So this is where we wanted to start.
Yeah, no, it's helpful clarification, just because I know HUD has such narrow and specific definitions, and, not to say that it's not for good reason, but sometimes there's a gap there, right? And so people who are not a married or familial structure can sometimes get left out of certain definitions, and be faced with an impossible choice if their partner is a part of their survival and safety, but that housing options are not available to them together, that can be a barrier. So I was curious.
And I think, we're going to come back to you all and talk about how do we grow our footprint in a supportive housing as an organization with our partners in the future. And I think this is, we want to be able to meet the needs of households like what you just mentioned, and families, and the folks that don't need this high a level of care. But we know that this is one of the hardest to serve populations, and there's such a need for it that even this is just a small step, but we hope in the right direction.
Thank you all for letting us dive into that quite a bit more than just the contract that's actually come to us for tonight. But Jill will also have a work session that kind of covers more broadly supportive housing. Is that what, mid-May?
It's in mid-May, and we're also just going to try, I think that what Commissioner Reed just talked about related to the Familiar Faces initiative, that initiative really looks at the intersection between criminal justice, behavioral health, and housing. You're going to hear from kind of a framing conversation, I think, even leading up to our work session on supportive housing, just to talk about that and what that intersection looks like today in terms of the county administrators' work in that space between myself, Bob Transky, Katie Fitzgerald. There's a lot of overlap right now, and I think just kind of framing up why continuing to dig into supportive housing as an initiative for our organization is another turn of the flywheel, so to speak. It's consistent with the work that we've already been doing.
Is a public hearing item. Is there anyone who would like to give public comment on this item? Is there anyone online who would like to speak on this?
Nope.
All right, with that, commissioners, are we, any further comments or a motion?
One final comment, and then I'll move it into a motion, which is just to say, Jill, I appreciate the point that this sort of scratches the surface, and it's one small space to zero in on right now, but I think that it's important to elevate that it's a very important space, and so choosing to center, bringing resources into our community to focus on an acute need, and to start there in sort of the most difficult space, the hardest to build relationships with landlords around, the hardest funds to sort of get, like, there's some I think real smart strategy to that, and necessity to it. But I think that the smartness in it is also that figuring out how to successfully administer this program and really sustain it just makes sort of all the other additions to the supportive housing spectrum and to building the capacity for supportive housing in our community will be easier because of it. Not to say that they won't be full of challenges still, right? But that to sort of start in the hardest place, that I think there's a lot of value in that personally.
Yeah, and I mentioned this just a little bit in terms of the administrative burden on our organization, but it is a burden. And, you know, with Brooke sitting here, just what we have to go through to draw down those dollars from HUD, it's not easy. I can't be a part of it. The process requires Sarah to be a part of it and Brooke to be a part of it, to segregate all the duties. It's a lot of work. And the compliance, the monitoring that we'll have to go through, it's a burden. So I am glad that Sarah was supportive of us stepping into this space with this grant, but it's been illuminating to us. And I think, you know, it's worth having a larger conversation if we decide to continue to go down this path with grants like this, because we are not a big staff, and we want to be good stewards of these dollars so we can keep getting them.
Any other comments before I make a motion? All right. I move to authorize a community partner agreement with Burt Nash Mental Health Center for $321,032 to serve as a subrecipient of a fiscal year 2022 Continuum of Care competition grant for a period of 18 months for staff to complete the contract.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Matthew.
thank you very much to both the county team and the Burt Nash team for this work. It's going to be a big lift, and we're really appreciative. Thank you. That brings us to appointments and/or Commissioner Miscellaneous. Do we have any appointments to act on tonight?
I don't think any are on tap for tonight.
All right, I know I don't have any. So I'm going to turn it back to Jill to give us an administrator memo.
Commissioners, we're happy to stand for any questions on the memo. Went through some of the upcoming events. The judges luncheon, I know, was one that was on there, but we're happy to stand for any questions that you have on any of the items that are in there.
Any questions, commissioners? Me neither. Do we have any miscellaneous items from commissioners? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for being here.